What's up, everybody? Hey, it's Mike Whitmer with the Expansion Real Estate Group. Happy Friday to you. Welcome to this month's edition of the monthly market update. Well, we're in November. That's pretty much impossible to believe, but Thanksgiving is 2 weeks away, coming to the end of 2025, which has been a pretty incredible year. It's been up and down and kind of slow, just a lot of things going on. But let's jump into the stats. We've got a lot to go over and see what's happening with this real estate market here in Phoenix. All right, start off with what we always do with the Comfort Market Index. And if you look over here on the far right, you can see something we don't really want to see because we've had such a nice trend upwards the last 5 months. But last month we did dip down a little bit. We started off last month at 81.7 and we finished off down at 78.8. So we dropped 2.9 points on the index. And that really has to do with the supply, which we'll talk about here in a second. But we did see a downward trend on that. And then today we are sitting right at 78.3. So we're down about a half a point the first half through the market or through the month. So that's actually good news because that's at a much slower pace of decline. And if we look over here on the daily chart, like we like to see here, you can see here the last week or so, it's kind of leveled out a little bit. We got down to 78.1 was the lowest, and now we're sitting again 78.3 today. So looking over here, why did that happen? Why is this number dropping? Well, the biggest reason has been the supply, right? We talked about the supply had been falling for a while, and now it has started to rise again. Last month we had a big jump. I think it was like 5% up, but this month is much, much better. Last month we had 19,150 single family homes, and today we have 19,235. So only a half of a percent up. And again, that number I track is only single family homes. That doesn't include condos, mobile homes, things like that. So the supply index, remember last month we were right at neutral. We were 99.9, and this month we're sitting at 104.8. So that supply has risen. But the good news is demand also went up a little bit. Last month we were at 80, and today we're at 82. So looking over here at the demand piece, just real quick, I mentioned last month that we had hit the lowest interest rates we had all year. But I talked about the Feds were going to cut the rate on the 29th. But I mentioned, I said that they kind of priced it in ahead of time. And so if they did a quarter point cut, which they did, I said rates would probably jump up a little bit, even though they're cutting the rate. If they did a half a point drop, it would have been a much bigger reaction. But that's what happened. So we got all the way down to 6.17 the day after the rate cut. And we've been climbing pretty steadily since then, but we're still sitting at 6.25. That's, again, it's a far cry from 2.5, but it's also a far cry from 8% that we did get up to. So that's really good news. So the buyers are appreciating that, and they're coming out in just a little bit more enthusiasm in the market. So one other stat here that I thought was pretty interesting that we talked about too, the median home sales price is right at $479,000, which is actually up 0.8% year over year, but it's down 2% from last month. And if you remember, I talked about this a little bit last month as well. This Comfort Index that we look at, that's a lead measure, and then prices usually follow 3 to 6 months behind. So when we're looking at that daily chart, you can't see it here. Even though we had these 3 months of increase, prices are still going down. So we'll have to see what happens here. Are we going to kind of flatten out again and then go back up towards the end of the year, or are we going to continue to trickle down? We'll have to see that. But right now we're not at a point where we're going to see prices stop declining. Hopefully it'll slow down. But remember, though, just lead measure versus lag measure. And then one other thing, kind of a major conversation I wanted to have with you guys today. We've been using this term of affordability. We've talked about that all year long, really almost 3 years. That's why the market's been so slow, is because people can't afford the payments, they can't qualify for the mortgages when the rates are 7.5%, 8%. And again, our home prices just have not dropped that much over time. So this administration, the Trump administration, and Bill Pulte, he's in charge of the mortgage side, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They've been throwing out these different ideas, and I'm sure you've probably seen it on the news, your social media. I wanted to kind of just talk about them real quick. The first one that you've been hearing a lot about is a 50-year mortgage. And that is a real thing. That is a real conversation. I don't think they wanted it quite leaked out yet, but it got out there because I think a lot of the economists out there, they're not crazy about this. What does it actually do for us that's good? It does lower monthly payments. So taking that mortgage and spreading it out over 50 years versus 30 years, it lowers that monthly payments. So as we have these high prices and higher rates, more first-time home buyers, more people that want to get into the market that are currently renting, gives them a better shot to qualify for it. Okay, that's the good piece. We do need more home ownership. The bad thing is, I think it's such a high risk, right? With a 50-year mortgage, in those first 10 years, there'll be hardly any interest paid down, literally hardly any interest over those first 10 years. So that buyer now and the bank truly is only going to depend upon price appreciation to build equity. Okay, so that I think that's a very, very scary thing. One little dip in the market and anybody that has a 50-year mortgage is almost certainly going to be underwater. It'll be super interesting because, again, if you think about this is being talked about for affordability, but as far as risk goes, will the bank require a larger down payment to reduce their risk? But again, that kind of defeats the purpose of getting first-time home buyers into a market if you're going to require them to put 10 or 15 or 20% down, which they just don't have. So that's the first thing you're talking about. I don't think that's going to happen, honestly. If it does, it'll take probably at least a year, because if you think about our mortgage meltdown in 2008, that we came up with this thing called the Dodd-Frank Act. And there's a lot of legislation in those laws that cap mortgages at 40 years. Most government loans like FHA and conventional, they're capped at 30 years, but there are some private loans that go to 40 years. So in order to introduce a 50-year mortgage, we literally need to change the laws. So that's a whole process. Don't expect anytime soon, but they are talking about it. The second thing that's already happened, and again, I don't necessarily think this is a great thing either, they have eliminated a minimum FICO score for some products. That's already happened. So it used to be Fannie Mae had what was called a 620 FICO score minimum through their automated underwriting. They have a system desktop underwriter where they put all your information in and it spits out an approval or a decline. That minimum used to be 620. So if you were a 619, it was an automatic decline. Now they've removed that and they're going to kind of take a broader look at your whole scenario. So maybe you have a 600 credit score, but maybe you have really great assets, maybe you have really great income. So I think that part's good, but I think what we have to be very, very careful of here is we just went through this 20 years ago. When we lower credit requirements to a point where it's drastic, that never ends up well. So again, this isn't saying credit score doesn't matter. It's just saying that minimum score isn't a complete decline. It's just if you have other assets, other things that can use that. So I think that part's good, but it just shows us where they're going. If they need more activity, they need more loans. So what are they going to do? And again, when you think about that, the government doesn't have a great track record of planning things out and thinking long-term. I think very short-term and not long-term. So we'll see what happens there. And the last thing, which I think probably is the most realistic one of having a little bit of a difference, is what's called a portable mortgage. And a portable mortgage basically means if you're one of those millions of homeowners in America right now that has a 2.5 or a 3 or 3.25% interest rate, they're saying with a portable mortgage, you could take that rate and loan and move it to your next house. So that is actually a really wonderful idea. And that would do one thing, but not the other. What it would do is it would increase activity in the market because more people, again, there's so many people that want to move, but they can't justify it financially because the rates are so much higher than they have. So if they could move and keep their rate, literally millions of people across the country would move if they could do that. But what it doesn't help is, again, that affordability piece for the people who are trying to get into the market. Because if you don't have a mortgage at 2.5%, you can't move it, right? So it does one piece, but not the other. But I think the really, really wonderful thing is that we are focusing on affordability. We are trying to find ways to make it easier for people to get into homes and to qualify for homes. And again, have some sort of that American dream left over. So super interesting conversation. Keep an eye on that. You're gonna see that conversation happening a lot on the news, on your social media. But again, I always come here for the facts and what's going on, and I'll always shoot you guys straight. One last thing here is as we move into the end of the year, I've said this the last few months, I really believe if you're a buyer, if you're thinking about buying, I think these next 45 days are an amazing time to make an offer. Because usually what happens from Thanksgiving till about the third week of January, the market and the buyers kind of go away. We have Thanksgiving, we have Christmas, we have New Year's, or all these things that people kind of go in that holiday mode and they kind of pull back from the market. So sellers get desperate. If there's a seller that really needs to sell in the next 2 months, there's some good chances to make some pretty low offers, get your set, have a rate buy down, have your closing costs paid for. I just think it's a wonderful opportunity for buyers in this next little short window. All right, guys, have an amazing Thanksgiving. Enjoy the time with your family and have a great month, and we'll see you next month.